And I don't know if I'm going to say the name right, but I see we have Tigran from Garamendi's office. I'm wondering, do we have an idea of who we are expecting? Well, there's Ian. That was definitely expected.
Yeah, I imagine maybe some folks from our district office will join as well. Okay. But I'll leave that up to Ian. I'm sure he's communicated with them.
This is Ian from the Congressman's office. Sorry to be 2 minutes late. The entire district staff was invited. They will join at their leisure, but I think in the interest of time, let's get started.
Okay. Okay, and EJ will be coming in as quickly as possible. So let's go ahead and get started. Let's just be very quick and brief. And for whoever it is that might be taking meeting minutes, I don't know if that's Celia or Water Resources. There we go. Thank you very much. We'll just say that 3 out of the 5 are currently here, Dr. Lyons, Peter Windrum, and myself. And then we'll have EJ joining us soon. There are no extra items. Let's just go ahead and hit up item number 3, which I think can encompass the entire conversation with our Congressman's office staff as well. And I'd love for Dr. Lyons, if you can kind of start that conversation about the Army Corps and see if you can get us started on that.
Yeah, this stems from Ian's offer to discuss the project status and how best to engage the Congress and the Corps. That's what we're up to. I sent a quick review of our progress to Ian. Essentially, those staff members on the Congressman's side, what we've accomplished is by the end of the calendar year, we have purchased 3/4 of the property required in this project. We've contacted PG&E and Caltrans to get the rest of the LERDs finished on this project through the action of the supervisors, principally the supervisors on this committee. There's been $800 in funds. $800,000 in funds set aside for 1/4 of the design expenses as stated by the Army Corps. So we're moving, and what we want to do is we want to understand the process to get monies allocated for this fund from the Congress. I want to read for you what's required for us to reach the record of decision, but what we're really interested in is steps required to move beyond the rod, to the rod and beyond the rod to the design phase and then the construction phase. So it's 3 steps: getting to the rod, getting to the design, which we already have our money in line for, and then getting Congress to appropriate funds for the construction. We are interested in any new avenues of funding that would come from the infrastructure bill that is in the works. We are interested in letting Congress and the Corps know that the 3 items that Congress has been attuned to in the 2020 Water Resources Development Act, that is water storage, climate change, and environmental justice are key items in this project. Environmental justice involves setting up a habitat that the tribal entities have enjoyed for centuries. Climate change, this marsh will put us in much better shape for the storms that we expect in the years to come in the north end of Clear Lake. And water storage, it will increase the storage capacity not only for Lake County, but for also Yolo County, who has a right to quite a chunk of the water in Clear Lake. So it's of regional interest. So essentially what we're interested in is, when do we act, how do we act, and whom do we act with in terms of moving the project forward? And we would entertain any further questions you would have on the progress. And I would ask my sidekick, Peter Windrum, if I have not hit any items that we wanted you to know about before we began the discussion.
Oh, you're muted, Peter.
Harry, you hit them all.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Lyons. As you hear, the project does not cease to be important for the future of Lake County. We are experiencing those things that Dr. Lyons just described as we speak. We went from a drought to now kind of worried about floods, and this does help us out with both of those situations. And we're excited about the possible of opening up of other funding sources through the conversations that are being had right now currently at the federal government, and just looking for some guidance from you all as to how it is that we can proceed to be best positioned to get to our end goal.
Okay, is that directed to the Congressman's office, or is there a representative from the Corps of Engineers on this call?
No, there's nobody from the Corps. That's directed to you.
Okay. So I think I've said this individually to a couple of members of the Restoration Project Committee, Advisory Committee a couple of times. So I'll just sort of try to reiterate. There is going to be a substantial amount of money provided to the Army Corps of Engineers for both flood control and restoration projects, but we cannot earmark that money. No member of Congress is ever going to be able to come in with an earmark to pay for 90% of the project, period. That's just the cold, hard reality of the process that we're confronted with. So that's not the way Rep. Garamendi would want it. That's not the way I would assume Congressman Thompson would want it, although I don't pretend to know his views on this, although I do know he supports this project. But that's the reality. So yes, there will be lots of money. And basically what we're doing is we're providing to the Corps of Engineers a extra amount of money to fund backlog and other projects. But the selection of those projects is going to go through the normal Army Corps process, the way that they fund every other activity in the Corps. So the challenge and I would say my recommendation is that the goal of the county and the Restoration Coalition, or your advisory committee, is to get the Middle Creek project, on that list. Get it on the same list that the Army Corps uses to fund all of their other priorities this year, being different that they're just going to have more money available, which means they can fund more projects off of that list. So you have to get it on the Army Corps Sacramento District Office project priority list. And that's an annual list that the Corps itself puts together. And I believe in the past, the Corps has recommended this at the local level. That list then gets transmitted to the division level, in this case, the Pacific Division. And then from there, there's a culling. And then this last and final culling is when they take all of the project lists from the different divisions and do a culling at Army Corps headquarters and come up with the final list for that year. So your challenge is to get the Middle Creek project on that list and make it a nationally competitive project so that it survives those 2 additional cullings that I just outlined. And once it's on that final project list, not only can we get it funded, it probably is almost guaranteed to be funded, because Congress, the way that the system is set up, and again, this isn't the way Rep. Garamendi would want it, this is just the way it is that basically the Army Corps picks those projects based on the amount of money they anticipate to have from Congress, and it's a nationally competitive list of projects, and then they work through their annual appropriation from Congress and go down the list. And they typically also don't fund every project in full. They do it in annual installments. So once you're on one national project list, you're almost certain to be on that list until the project is fully funded, assuming that there are no cost overruns. So the challenge with Middle Creek, as I understand it, has been twofold. One, that the land acquisitions necessary to actually begin the project pre-construction phase, including planning and design, for which there are federal funds available under a 65-35 cost split, I believe, that federal funds are not used for land acquisition. That is considered to be, for all Army Corps projects, considered to be a local responsibility. So until the county, in this case, the non-federal sponsor is effectively the county, although I understand it's a subdivision of the county, completes the land acquisition, this is not going to be a competitive project for the purposes of the Army Corps' national list. Does that make sense? And the reason being is there's nothing to fund, because from their perspective, the project's not ready to go. So that is sort of the immediate local task, is completing the work necessary to actually have a project that can be considered for those lists. And then once that's done, you can get on those lists. So there is some, I think once you get closer to the end of the land acquisition, which it sounds like the county's quickly approaching, there's some opportunity to get onto those lists, project lists, before the land acquisition is a 100% complete, but with the understanding that you have commitments from the landowner, the remaining landowners, et cetera, and you expect to get the land acquisition completed. But that work needs to be done before any member of Congress, Congressman Garamendi or otherwise, can go about trying to secure federal funds for the actual project. And that's, so this same process, which is, you know, very laborious and at times irritating, is the same process that every Army Corps project has to go through in the entire country. And this is how, you know, Congressman Garamendi's office has to navigate the same process for all of our projects in the California Third. And there are dozens. And this is one of them, and it's a priority project, but it's really a question not about the particular merits of the Middle Creek project, but just getting those checklist items done so that it can actually be considered and put through that competitive national culling. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. And I believe that is there a 2-year timeline in getting those lists to Congress for appropriation, or is that an annual timeline?
Every single year.
Okay.
And they usually prepare it they start working on it in the fall. And then the project list comes out when the president's budget request comes out. That's the final list that I was talking about. Okay. So when each federal agency completes their budget submission to Congress for every year, in the case of the Army Corps, it's not just a budget submission, it's literally a list of projects that the Army Corps is asking to be funded by Congress in the coming fiscal year. And they specify specific projects, specific dollar amounts, specific sub-activities within those projects. So you will know when you're successful when you see the Middle Creek project listed in the president's budget. Okay.
And then when we get to what you're saying is maybe when we get to 90% or 95% of our checklist before we can move on to the next steps, then start working with the Army Corps to get on their localized list of priorities and just keep trying every single year after that to make sure that we're always on that list and hopefully end up on that federal list that's provided to Congress through the president's budget.
That's exactly right. So basically you're denied every year until you're approved. That's the way to think about it.
Okay. Okay.
And again, I understand that it's frustrating, and believe me, the Army Corps of Engineers, the Congressman's office certainly appreciates is at times a very frustrating and difficult agency to work with. But this is we have to dance with the one who brung you, and this is the process that they have, and so we have to work within the constraints of it in order to advocate for our priorities, including this one.
Okay. Do you know if there are avenues to help us in getting on the priority list? Are there certain sponsors that would help us to get Army Corps to say, yes, this is a good project, or is it really just based on the description of the project itself? Just looking to see what's our better way to make sure that when the Army Corps, when we're requesting to be on the priority list, that we actually get on that priority list.
I guess in my experience, and again, I've only been on the Congressman staff for 3 years now, but there's not a lot of politicking that happens about the project lists. The people who make the decisions about what goes on the list are all career federal employees, uniform or civilian, at the Army Corps of Engineers. So it has nothing to do, basically it has nothing to do with political priorities, administrative priorities. It has almost, support from Congress is nice, but the Army Corps is going to do what they do. And so it really is more of a bureaucratic question about getting on those lists than it is somehow, a level, a measure of influence. That being said, when you can show that you have a widely supported project. The commitment of California state funds to this project is a good indication of that. I think it was DWR funds recently to complete the land acquisition. The fact that you have an engaged and supportive congressional delegation, in this case, Reps Thompson and Garamendi are both on the record advocating for this project. And the fact that if, this is a multifaceted project, I would encourage you guys to frame this as a flood control and not a restoration project, because the federal share for flood control projects is more generous than restoration projects, which is 50-50, or 55-45. But so keep that in mind. Those other elements are interesting, but at the end of the day, this is a bureaucratic culling, and all they're going to look at is what type of project is it? Have they done the activities they need to do in order to be considered, like the completing land acquisition? Is the non-federal sponsor in a position to pony up their share of the non-federal costs? At this time, Lake County, I think the answer on that is no. And then furthermore, is it something that is a priority for the Corps of Engineers itself? Does it fit within their hierarchy of different projects that they're dealing with in the region? In this case, there's dozens of Army Corps projects in this area. So it's definitely a competitive process, no doubt about that. I've actually been trying to track down the statutory basis for this project for a while now and figure out in which Water Resources Development Act was this even authorized back in the day. So to actually build these same, I can help structures that we now have to do a study and federal project to dismantle. Yeah.
It's 2007. This was approved on the Water Resource Development Act 2007. So it has been a while. I just wonder, recently the Congressman Garamendi had a press release on all of the Army Corps of Engineers projects, and we weren't mentioning that, and I'm just whining a little bit about that, but I wonder.
Well, you weren't. I wrote that press release. You weren't mentioned in it because there was nothing to mention. So all of those project lists were authorized in WRDA 2020 because they were either getting funded, getting authorized, or had some other kind of legislative action. So there was just nothing to mention about Middle Creek because there was no legislative action item on it.
Okay, so it's nothing current in terms of legislative action at all.
Yeah, that wasn't a list of priority projects. That was a list of projects that happened to be mentioned in that one federal law.
Okay.
I have a follow-up question. You mentioned that Lake County is not prepared for the local funding. Must we be prepared for not only the design, but also the construction when it comes to the actual funding total?
Oh, yes. In no universe is the federal government going to come in and build 100% of this project. So I believe for a flood control project, which again has a more generous cost share. So I would encourage you guys to keep this project categorized in that way, although I do understand there's ecosystem restoration benefits. 65-35.
Yeah, that's
65 fed, 35. And even based on the project size, 35%, that's a lot of money for Lake County to come up with.
Yeah.
Now that money can be from a variety of non-federal sources. It can be state money, it can be county revenue, it can be bond money, it can be whatever, in-kind contributions to the county, the non-federal sponsor, the county government in this case. But the Army Corps of Engineers got out of the business of building federal projects by themselves in the 1950s.
Having said that, however, we don't have to have that money in hand in a bucket sitting here for 5 or 6 years.
No, but you do need to have funding commitments.
Right.
So when you
you
have to be able to demonstrate, have identified potential revenue sources that can come up with that money, or you can have commitments for state grants, bond commitments, whatever, letters of intent, things like that. So you don't have to have the money sitting in escrow in a bank account somewhere, but you do have to be able to demonstrate with a reasonable degree of certainty where you will come up with that money to meet that cost share for the total project cost. And because this is a multi-year process, and building, we have projects in the Congressman district that they have literally been moving dirt for like 10 years on. So these take a long time to build, which is why they're funded in multiple installments. So yeah, the county is not going to be expected to come up with 35% cash up front, but it is going to be expected to have that cost share for the project and then be able to demonstrate where it thinks it can actually find that money.
So in this stepwise assessment and providing of funds, this usually means that the design phase is handled, funded, dealt with quite separately from the construction phase in almost all of the projects you have experience with?
Yes, so there's two different phases and they are funded separately, and you have to have like a feasibility study for your project, and the federal government contributes part of the cost to complete that feasibility study. Once you have the feasibility study completed, then you have that's when you get your project authorization. In this case, I don't think you actually need that because that work's been done. I'd have to go look at the history of I haven't pulled the 2007 authorization, so thank you, Harry, for that. But yes, the pre-construction costs, including planning and design, are funded somewhat differently than the actual construction. In some cases, they actually have a different cost share. I think for flood control, the federal feasibility study, the plan, if you will, is a more generous cost share.
And under the agreement for this project, it's 75-25, meaning 25%, and that's the $800,000. That's actually for the design phase. That's on the quote of the estimate of the Corps that it would cost $3.2 million to do the design. The 25% share that is the county's is the money that's sitting in the bank right now, waiting to be spent to meet that 25% commitment. Of course,
Yeah, so so then the next order of business is getting the federal funding commitment to fund the study,
right?
And then funding the overall project is a separate issue. So you could perhaps, if the county is on track to complete the land acquisitions over the next several years in a timely manner, which it seems to be the case, having made a lot of progress after basically making no progress on this project for the better part of 10 years, as far as I could tell.
Right.
That's not a criticism, that's just what happened. It seems pretty likely that you could get the Corps to fund their portion of the study, the feasibility cost, before you've completed the land acquisition, although that would require them to take a little bit of a gamble that you're going to be able to actually execute all the land acquisition. But then best case scenario, you get the feasibility study funded and completed, and by the time it's completed, you have also completed the land acquisition, and then you're ready to go into the project construction phase, the implementation phase.
Okay. And Ian, there's one step before that that Harry mentioned. That's the ROD, and it's because it requires some updates. For example, environmental updates from last time. It was certified years ago, but it has to be updates. It's not clear getting the money for that, whether that has to be congressional appropriation, or can that decision be made internally by the Corps with its own resources? In other words, heretofore appropriated.
I don't really like the framing of your question, because the Corps doesn't actually have its own resources. It only has the resources Congress gives it. Okay. So all of this work by the Corps requires an appropriation from Congress. Okay. But for studies, including environmental review studies that you're talking about, assuming the record of decision is being done under federal law, NEPA, not under the California state environmental review law, then yeah, the Corps doesn't need a specific project authorization from Congress to do that. They have a general appropriation available for that type of work, available for all Corps projects nationwide. And in that case, they just need to choose to get out of bed one morning and use their funds on that specific project.
Okay. Ian, this is something that you and I...
It's also worth noting that they don't actually have to do new ROD. They are choosing to do a new ROD.
That's the other question. Yeah, I understand.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's nothing in federal law that says that your NEPA document expires after 10 years. That's just an internal agency decision and policy. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and a lot of the feasibility was incomplete. Is this the work that I have referred to as the work plan in previous communications?
Not, yeah, not really. So I guess the president's budget is a submittal by the Corps in the spring, or well, actually, it's supposed to be in February. Usually comes in April. About here's the work the Corps wants to do if given the money. Then in the fall, they release the work plan, which is a list of here's the work the Corps is going to do now that we have the money. That's the way I would think about it.
Okay.
So the work plan enumerates projects that the Corps has already committed to do and has identified or secured an appropriation from Congress to complete. And in some cases, they can identify specific actions in the work plan that they don't actually have to get a specific project appropriation for. So like a feasibility study, not a feasibility study, but like a chief's report or a environmental review under NEPA, like a new record decision, like they don't need to put that in, they won't put that in the president's budget, but they will sometimes put that in the work plan. It's a list of things that they're going to either complete now that they have the appropriation for Congress, or that they've chosen to use a general appropriation from Congress to do a specific activity, in this case, an environmental review.
And we were given a pinwheel diagram of the budget cycle for the Corps. Could we look at that? I know that it's ready, it's available for a screen share, and you could tell us where we are on that, or where we, would that make sense?
If you want to try the screen share, sure, go for it.
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't pretend to have a perfect understanding of, where this project is, but I can try to explain it. Yeah.
Okay, this is just generally what was given to us. If you can even make that bigger, that would be great on the screen. But starting
so
off,
now,
yeah.
Right now we are in, it's funny that this is from the agency's perspective. So right now we are in step 10.
Step 10. Okay.
Having completed none of the previous steps.
Meaning having completed or not completed, did you say?
Not completed.
None of that previous.
For this project. So nothing on this diagram applies to this project except step 10, which is where we are right now.
Okay.
So this is Congress doing completing the appropriations process. So passing laws that fund every federal department, agency, and program for the coming fiscal year, in this case, fiscal 22. Once that's done, it'll be signed. That'll probably happen by the end of the year. That's step 11. Then we go to step 12, the funding and allocation. Those are agency decisions made about from HQ. Here's how much money we have next for this coming fiscal year. Here's how much money you, local field office, district office, division get for all of your projects and programs. Step 3, or 13, the districts take that money and execute the things that they've already determined to execute. And then they go back to step 1, which is submitting a request for the following fiscal year.
Okay, so we're not in that.
You're not even on the board because you haven't gotten, this would apply to things that would have completed NEPA documents, completed land acquisition. This is how to fund either a congressionally authorized feasibility study or project construction. But you're not in any of those stages, as far as I understand.
Now, when we're somehow under the impression that we got as much as number 3, field office developing program, and then headquarters review, and then we get stopped there. But maybe we haven't even gotten to 3.
You probably get stopped there because their answer is they haven't completed you haven't completed the land acquisition, or you don't have enough funding identified, or it could even just be that they don't think that this project has a benefit to cost ratio that makes sense.
Okay. I think they did that, and since this is a funny one where they're knocking down the levies instead of putting them up, why they thought the benefit was knocking them down.
Well, they do that more often than you would think. No, the benefit cost ratio is actually a mathematical equation, and it literally, and this is a crude explanation, is how much does it cost? How many people does it help? How
Yeah.
much damage does it prevent? That's pretty much it.
Yeah.
They are not able to include in there. It's very, they don't really get to include like the value of a restored ecosystem is very hard for them to mathematically quantify for the purposes of that equation.
Yeah.
Very dry, not qualifiers. Okay.
So to whom should we be talking, Ian? I mean,
All right, go ahead.
I say the question, with whom should we be speaking to move the project forward?
So I think the hat trick is going to be, I mean, the county. And one of the things I've always found interesting is that I've never actually spoken to anybody from the flood control district, the actual county entity supposedly that's the sponsor of this project. I've only ever spoken with you all, very engaged and enthusiastic group of, I mean, you guys are volunteers, right?
Well, no, this is a Board of Supervisors sanction
Yeah.
committee right now. So Bruno is the one of the supervisors.
No, but you like Harry and Peter, like you are
We're volunteers,
right?
We're volunteers.
Correct. So I've always found that that's somewhat
Yeah.
unusual, but
Yes.
perfectly fine. But I just want to comment on that. So
Sorry. We're
so
on the
the-
committee too, but that's
correct. Yeah. So to move the ball forward is continuing to have the county complete the land acquisition, which it seems like they're doing, and
Yes.
then secondarily getting the Corps to make a determination about, do you need a new NEPA document? If so, to fund that NEPA work, which they can do in their work plan with their work plan funds. And then separately is to continue to get the feasibility study requested in the budget submission process. And that's an internal Corps decision.
Harry works constantly with the project manager or the core project person. Who's that, Harry? And then, but now we need people higher up to make decisions. And how does the board?
Yeah.
This is the board of the Board of Supervisors we're talking about.
Yeah. So it's great that you know the local project manager or the liaison from the Corps for this project. It's great that you're engaged with them, but you need their boss and their boss's bosses and their boss's boss's bosses to approve those requests in order to
Right.
survive those cullings I was talking about.
Right. And that okay. Go ahead, Harry.
It is the cullings that we don't survive. So for 3 separate years, the Corps has forwarded.
That's not atypical. There's projects that get rejected for a decade straight.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is that we need to somehow influence that second and third step once we have the land acquired and so on and so forth.
That's right. Well, I guess I would say, I would put to you that by completing the local, quote, local responsibilities, that will remove some of those impediments to you getting on those lists. So a project that's requested by the district that goes to the division level that has a completed land acquisition will be more competitive.
Makes sense.
I think that we had a high hope that we can move some of these layers simultaneously, but it sounds like we really need to take each step one at a time with maybe a tiny bit of layover from each one. But obviously we need to finish what we've been pushing to finish, which is the land acquisition, and then engaging with Sacramento's division and making sure that we keep putting ourselves on the list, and with hopes that we eventually get the design process completed. And at that next juncture, we need to make sure we have commitment of funds to pay for the construction portion of our end, and then being able to again be on that list so that we can get all the way up to the president's budget proposal. So that sounds to me like those are the steps we have to take. We were hoping that we can do some of those things simultaneously, but seems to have a very strict regimen of how that process functions and works, most likely due to the huge number of projects that are being requested throughout the entire county or country.
Yeah, so I mean, that would be a high class problem to have, is that you made it through all those levels and then you just didn't get in the president's budget. I would just say, you know, the immediate task is to just, one problem at a time and just keep working through that checklist until you get all the way to the bottom. And it is a laborious process, so I don't want to be glib about that. But it's doable. And part of it is just it requires a multi-year sustained effort by the non-federal sponsor to get these done. I mean, we had one example in the other part of the Congressman's district up in Yuba County where there was a project that Congressman Garamendi's office had worked on for the better part of 15 years that literally, like, they were ready to sign contracts, like all the funds had been secured, they were ready to go, and the entire thing fell apart last fall over 200 grand. And this was for $100 million project. So just know that this happens all the time.
All right.
One of the things that worries us, and I'm wondering if these other projects you have experience with, it was a similar issue. A lot of the infrastructure that we've been asked to change and support in preparation for the Corps' work, it interacts with what the Corps is going to do. So the PG&E changes and the Caltrans changes, highway changes, electrical grid changes. If we go ahead with that, it actually depends on the design, the Corps design. And I'm wondering if that the chicken and the egg problem with the Corps and the utilities and infrastructure has been a problem.
I'm not sure I understood the question, Harry. And I'm going to have to, can probably go for until 2:15 and then I'm going to have to step out.
Okay, then don't worry about that.
Yeah, I think we can have that conversation with the Corps to figure out as we discuss the design process again with them. Are there any further questions for Garamendi's office? And again, really appreciate staff's time being spent with us on this, what we feel is a really important project for the future of Lake County. So thank you very much for taking the time to help us better understand the process. Apologize if it's not the first time you've mentioned the process. We're just always looking for better ways to be positioned in a better place with all the funds that are being discussed. But it seems to me that the process remains the same and is pretty static. So we will continue to work on our end. I want to make sure and open it up. I know that we do have a couple of, two public members who are part of the land trust. Do they have any questions before we go ahead and move on?
I'm good. I'm fine too. Thank you.
All right. And Dr. Lyons, Peter, checking in last second.
No, I just want to thank Ian and appreciate it.
I do the same too. And I know we keep talking about it in terms of benefit to Lake County, but Clear Lake is a national treasure, probably the oldest lake in North America, and has extraordinary characteristics and this project is really important for the life of this lake. So it's more than just Lake County, it's California and far beyond. So thank you very much. I just can't tell you how much we appreciate your help.
I hear you, and you'll be pleased to hear that I've gotten into the practice of correcting people when they tell me that Lake Tahoe is the only large freshwater lake in California, and I disabuse them of that falsehood. So, this is not a question of Congressman Garamendi's support for the project. You have it. You have a commitment from myself and every member of the Congress and staff to help the non-federal sponsor, in this case Lake County, continue to move the ball forward. Just as a bit of commentary, I think after sort of years of back burner, I think we were all very impressed to see new life breathed into this project and the commitment of local and state funds to complete some of these early pre-construction activities. So job well done there, and we'll continue to work to help advance the ball. It's just, again, I hope I wasn't, I'm actually very appreciative of this opportunity to speak with all the interested parties for this and supporters for this project so that we can all sort of understand the framework within which we're forced to work and what we need to do to actually get this project over the line and break ground. So thank you for that opportunity.
Yeah, thank you very much. And we will keep you up to date as to our activities. That way you know what our progress looks like. And when we finally hit some of those milestones that we discussed, then we'll see about changing that conversation that we've had so far with the Army Corps, and again, keeping you up to date as to where we are.
You bet. And if you do get specific requests, like for example, the Congressman's office, we will sometimes do letters of support or even just lead a request. When you identify specific impediments you're facing with the course within the core process, let us know, and we can do a letter from the congressman. So we've done, for example, letters in the past saying, for the FY22 work plan, include funding for this environmental review for this project or whatever in that work plan, or for the president's budget, once you get past the division level, include, funding as recommended by the district and division for this project in the president's budget submission to Congress. So we can help out with that. You're not alone, but it's a question of sort of one foot after the other and reaching those benchmarks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for that.
Bye-bye.
All right. Thank you very much.
Let's sign off. Bye now.
EJ, I'll turn it over to you, and I think that we should continue the discussion rather than moving on the agenda that we just had. That way you're in the loop. Basically, Garamendi's office was very firm on the process that we have to follow. There's no skipping any process or overlapping much of the process. We have to be able to first conclude the property acquisitions, or at least get close to concluding the property acquisition, in order to request for the Army Corps to start taking steps toward a design process. We can't ask them to do that while we're still in the midst with a lot of unknowns. We still have some properties that people are saying they're not willing sellers, so that's going to be something we need to overcome before we can get the Army Corps to really start. Which kind of goes back to some of the conversations that we had in the past, that we need to simultaneously move on the unwilling sellers and willing sellers, or else we're only making our timeline go longer, because the Army Corps is more likely to say, yes, let's get started, if we have willing sellers that are willing to sit down and negotiate the terms of purchase, than those that are not. That way, if we can reach a high percentage of acquisition, we're going to be able to see that movement. But until then, most likely we will not see that movement. And even then, that doesn't mean that movement is promised or going to happen. We may need to continuously, annually request that funding appropriation be provided to the Army Corps in order to do their job. I think that a lot of ideas sprouted in my mind. I think that while letters supporting it in a more anecdotal way may not help, because obviously we can get a whole bunch of letters that say we support doing this. But I think if we get folks like the Land Trust, if we get folks like the Sierra Club and other environmental groups, that I think that would help us, because I think that as he stated, looking at flood control is going to be our #1 way through this. There's more funding available for that. And I'm certain that just the idea of climate change itself simultaneously is something that's going to help us as well. And so I think that's what we should really be focusing on when we get to that point, when we're looking to get them to approve our appropriations. Once a design is done, we do need to figure out how that we're going to commit money for the local jurisdiction. I believe he said 35% of the construction needs to be paid for locally. So whether that's going to be state commitment, whether that's local commitment, or any other commitment that's non-federal, we need to figure that out before, again, requesting that our project be placed as a priority on the president's budget of appropriations. And again, that could take years and years and years of asking and asking and asking. Doesn't mean it's going to happen just because it's there and we're ready for it. So I feel that we did position ourselves well for the first portion, which is requesting, do they need an update on NEPA and doing the design process? But we can't really move forward further until we really have that property acquisition at a much higher level than what we have it right now. Also, there was Harry brought up PG&E, or maybe it was Peter brought up PG&E and Caltrans. And I think that we just need to figure out from Army Corps, are they the ones that get involved with PG&E and Caltrans and within the design process decide what needs to happen? Or does Caltrans and PG&E need to make their decisions separate? And then we make a design based on what that separate decision was. And I think that's going to be the answer is going to provide us some guidance on how to move forward on that. Even though we already have some suggestions from PG&E on what they are willing to do and what they want to do, it's still, it's a potential barrier to moving forward on the design process until further notice. And I think we need to get specific answers to those questions. I think I summarized it pretty well.
I think you did too.
Unless I missed
I
something.
agree.
I'm summarizing. I want you to know that at no time has the Army Corps said that we couldn't proceed until everything was purchased. So there is a backbone problem with the Army Corps. They have been forwarding our project for 3 separate years, and they must know that there was little hope of that getting beyond the district level. And I think it's a compliment to what they felt about this program, what this project, because this was the forlorn hope that they kept sending out for certain defeat. And it's interesting to me that the political wing of our society is quite willing to bluntly tell us, you got to get the land first.
Well, I think that they also probably have, as he mentioned, a few different projects in his district. When you have 20 projects, let's say in one district, all asking for appropriations, it's hard from a political standpoint to tell someone else that somebody snuck through and they haven't completed their local responsibilities when others may have. So I think that they have to also try and create a realistic process for their constituents and their requests of projects and stuff like that. So I think that we hit a lot of different types of challenges. I think we need to continuously write to the Army Corps saying, put it on the list, even if it doesn't go anywhere, at least it doesn't go anywhere and it was on the list. I think we never give up on that. I think we need to look at what's a better way to do it, a percentage of properties or percentage of acres that we have acquired, because I think a percentage of acres is going to really benefit us in our argument because we're purchasing the largest properties and we already have purchased the largest properties. And I think that showing the progress on an acre basis is going to really show our progress looking much better than if it's on a per property or property owner basis. So I think that we can play with our narrative to try and make it look as good as possible so that the Army Corps is in a better position to fight for us to get this project, because that's really the way that I look at it. It's a partnership with Sacramento, that they are trying to fight for the same project we are fighting for, and it's when it gets out of their hands that it's almost out of everyone's hands, and it becomes clear as to that does this project need to be funded or not.
Did any discussion happen about the potential zoning and all of that, or is it still too early to even talk about that?
I didn't want to bring that up just because we didn't really say positive things about, so they want to bring up redistricting.
Okay.
I mean, in a sense, it doesn't matter. If Garamendi stays, this project impacts his district still because he's in Yolo County, and Yolo County is impacted by what comes out of this lake. And so I think that, you know, in some ways, while yes, it is a little frustrating that we might have completely different representation from the federal down to the state level, we still have people who know what this project is. And so maybe now we can add more voices that can be in favor of this project, even though they may not represent us. So I'm not too unhappy about the prospect of the future. It would be nice if we can keep some of those that we know can speak up for us very loudly and bravely, but at the same time, having more people to understand what this project is and why it's important to get it done could also be beneficial for us. But at the same time, Ian did just say, it's not a political situation. It's really an engineering and financial status of the projects more so than political power and political capital.
Okay.
I guess I continue to be of a mind that while that's absolutely true, it's also true that ultimately the Army Corps does what Congress wants them to do. And because they're the people that write the checks. And I noticed, for example, off the Warm Springs Dam coming down from there, they had a big restoration project to make it the Army Corps writes up and makes a notation that it's supported by Mike Thompson and Jared Huffman. They are very much cognizant of, in terms of giving priorities about what a member of Congress thinks about in his own or her own district, which ones are the most important. So I think that still remains part of the equation. Anyhow, but anyway, excellent summary, Bruno. I thought that stated it well.
So I think we're doing what we should be doing.
Yeah.
I know all of us wish we could be moving faster, and I'm not going to fault Water Resources for the process. It's got to go through the state, which is a horrendously slow, like molasses process. We've had some struggles with some of our contracts, and it seems that we're getting some of those finalized. I'm pretty sure we're at least halfway done with Paragon, with their priority properties that were placed on their list of properties to take action on. And so I'm sure we'll get to that update soon. And I'm sure Celia, with her hand up, probably just had her ears ringing when I said that. So Celia.
Absolutely. It's starting to hurt. No. Yeah, with Paragon, we are more than halfway through. I think we only have 2 left with Paragon. The others are in escrow or in progress. And then as soon as we get those plats and legals, which there was a little delay, I understand they're coming this week, then the notice of decision to appraise goes out, and we're going to do a mass mailing for the remainder of the property. So my hope is by the first of the year, we'll be able to identify how many we've got closed or that are closing. We can actually look at the list of those that have not closed or are not willing, and then we can formulate our plan to start condemnation on those so that we're not caught at the tail end of our extension. Because condemnation would take about 6 months or so if everything went in our favor. So I actually feel really good, because I feel like this last 8 weeks, we've made a lot of progress on the acquisition side. I've just really been pushing everyone I can push at the state, kind of like a duck pecking your heel in a nice way.
That's good.
Sort of.
Eventually it hurts.
Yeah. Then they want you to go away. So that's what I'm working on.
It's a good strategy. It's my strategy as well.
That's good.
I know that we did get Monument on board. I think it was just a little slow at the beginning just to get them in the movement and in the comfort zone to move that process forward. And so I'm hoping that eventually we'll start seeing things moving in a much faster way. Again, I don't think anybody from Water Resources to us does not share the frustration of the process, but the process is the rules that we were provided and the rules that we have to abide to in order to complete what we're doing. I will say, and I know EJ always tells me, don't worry about it, but it feels weird saying it, but I think one of our greatest advantages is the history of the area. And I know it may not matter to the Army Corps, but if we have letters coming from the UPNC or letters coming from almost all of our tribes to say how important this is for both the environment as well as for the historical value of the area, I think that helps. And I think that we need to not forget that there's still human beings on the other side. They may have a rubric that they have to abide to in order to get things through. But I think that the fact is we still have emotional human beings who care about stuff. And the way that we are moving is towards resolving past practices that have destroyed things that should maybe not have been destroyed. And so I think that we need to make sure to have as many letters of support from our local tribes as we make those communications continue to happen with the Army Corps, because in my mind and in my heart, I think they make a difference.
You know, I'm glad you said that, Bruno, because that's kind of why I was late, is a very similar discussion about something else near and dear to tribal leaders. And I kind of wanted to prevent a protest, but either or, either or, you know, I know you've been saying it, and I think one of the reluctancies that I've always had, and this is just, I'll just be open with all of you, is I'm Native American, I'm from a tribe, and so it feels like I'm pushing something on an agenda if I'm pushing that. And so when you say it, and I know you genuinely mean it. You know, you've always genuinely meaning it. In looking into this, this may be an advantage for us when it comes to the present people in the administration right now when it comes to this area. And with that emphasis, it could focus them on this project. Like, wait, this is a historical landmark as well, where this is supposed to happen, and let's do it. You know, like they may push it forward because of that, and ensure that we can do what we need to. That's kind of where you're going with it, right, Bruno? Yeah. And so I think it's something too to get the energy of the tribes on the same page with it, because a lot of them are affected by it as well, even if they didn't have family members from there. After that took place, they continued on into like Mendocino County and all these other places, and there's historical value stating that what happened in 1850 was kind of like a pilot program to the other things that took place, like in the Midwest and whatnot, because of how unaffected they were or accountable they were held to what happened. So I don't know if that makes any sense, but I know that's a big conversation that we have at different leadership forums when it comes to that, is that Bloody Island was the pilot project, if you will, because nothing before that took place as such. So, yeah.
I'd like to add.
To be known for.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that. I think for the well-being of this country, this project is equally important to all of the school kids from everywhere and the rest. I don't want to say it. I don't want to put it in terms of equality terms. I think it's immensely important to the country, to all of us. I mean, I feel this so deeply that it's that what we do, and it's a cautionary tale. That's, to me, is the huge part. It's a cautionary tale. This can happen again, folks. This is as it's happened before in history. And unless we're extremely vigilant every day, it can happen again. And that, to me, is the huge lesson that we take away from that experience, and why when we speak in favor of it, I'm speaking from the perspective that I have, and that voice can be every bit as loud and should be every bit as loud, if not louder, than the voices of the tribes. This is not just a tribal matter by any means. It's much, much larger. That's how I look at it. So.
Thank you, Peter.
Ilya? Did you still have your hand up from before, or it looks like it popped back up?
Oh, sorry, I didn't take it down.
Oh.
I don't know
thought
how
you
to
had
take
your
it
hand
back
up
down.
again.
Sorry.
No worries. No worries at all. So are there any further comments on the Army Corps conversation?
Val Nixon had a question about funding for condemnation, which is a really good question. I know that Marina is looking for other funding sources. I imagine some of it will come out of local funds. There probably is a portion of local funding that will have to pay for condemnation action. But I don't know the answer to that one.
Yeah, I think we're going to have to look far and deep in our pockets to be able to figure that out. Just because I think if we want to meet the timeline of those that are willing sellers, we're going to have a pretty aggressive plan put in place in order to meet that same deadline, or else it's going to make it last a lot longer.
The other thing, in my experience with the South Main Soda Bay Road project and the acquisitions that we're working on there, a lot of times the people in that group will start to talk among themselves as far as their experience with the acquisition or the sale of what we're buying. And once we get some momentum on that, it seems usually more people are on board than those that aren't. And that helps the momentum of everyone else realizing, okay, this project is going to do these things, so let's sell and help out. So sometimes that works in our favor.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Please.
Yes, go ahead.
It's more of a suggestion, and it became more prominent to me as we're having the discussion of all the other important aspects. What Ian said is the final gate is going to be cost benefit. And if we go, I get it, the flood control has the most money, but is that where we're going to get the best cost benefit? I think that needs to be looked in terms of the different, maybe talking to Sacramento in terms of the different pots of money that are being appropriated right now for the Army Corps. If we're really poor cost benefit for flooding, it doesn't matter anything else. But if we get a higher cost benefit for other aspects of the project, then that might be the best way to go, in my opinion. We really need to focus on what their mathematical equation is going to be for cost benefit.
Yeah, I don't disagree. And that's why I keep putting climate change within the idea of flood as well. Just because fires can be attributed to the fact that we just don't have enough water in our lake during these major droughts. I'm sure that what's good is every emergency that we've had, and typically floods do get declared as emergency if they start harming our residents, getting their houses flooded and whatnot, that we start keeping track of those costs because we declare the emergency. It becomes quite a bureaucratic process to track every little thing that we do. So if we wanted to find out what was the cost of the 2017 flood, 100%, I'm sure we could figure it out. We probably have to give them some time to collect all the data, but it's available to us. And so we can look at the cost analysis by looking at things like that. But I think we should also add our fires. What's the cost of the fires? If we had more water surrounding our communities, which this would do, it would create a easier to deal with landscape when it comes to fire around our communities.
I could locate, there is a cost benefit analysis that was done some years ago to make this decision to breach rather than restore. I would offer to find that and make a copy of it, so you just get an idea of how the Corps did that analysis back then. In essence, the cost of maintaining levees that are sinking was greater than the benefit derived by keeping it as agricultural land. I mean, that was the equation at the time. So better to, and as a matter of fact, it's this ironic twist was that the reason that the local agency became the project sponsor was because the California flood board, what's that title? The state flood board that manages most all of these things all the time, their charter doesn't allow does not provide for destruction of levees. It's for construction of levees. And ergo, in order to have a project sponsor, the county's water district became the project sponsor. That's how it was explained to me. It's an ironic twist, but so anyway. But I'll circulate that so you can see the section where give you an idea, a feel for how at least ways back when that the Corps did that cost benefit analysis and their approach to it.
I'm just wondering about the flood control. When we talk about how it affects the community, it affects a direct route to getting to a hospital, because it floods the roads there. So I just wondered if it can be included in the analysis of that.
You could share.
We need to get all of those points made.
Yeah, I don't know if that was included before with the cost ratio benefit of how many people are affected. But that affects a lot more people than just the immediate backup of flooding people's property.
True, that's true. Yeah, I don't know the answer.
We have the PG&E representative on by phone. So should we move on to that item or? Okay, so we're on the PG&E discussion with the representative, Melinda Rivera. And thank you, Melinda, for coming in. We've been meeting with PG&E. We started this ad hoc committee, just a little history. We started the ad hoc committee in 2019 with the help of Peter Lindrum and Harry Lyons. And they have been meeting with, or had been working on this project for quite some time as a group, as an ad hoc group. And so we decided to put together an actual committee comprised of myself and Supervisor Spatier, Peter, and Harry, with water resources, so that we can keep on task with the different items that need to be pushed forward to ensure this project happens. Because as you know, it's been going on since like the 90s. And so, that's if there's anything else you would like to add, Supervisor Sabatier, that's just my summary of what we are. And PG&E, of course, has the 6 different towers that are that range across the project, which is now levied in. But once and if this project moves forward, the water will fill in and possibly submerge some of those towers. And so we've been told at different times and had discussion about that and what potential situations could occur. So if you'd like to add anything, Supervisor Spatier.
Yeah, I'll just add that we've already had some conversations with PG&E in the past. We've been provided letters saying that if we provide something like $100,000 for the transmission line and $100,000 for the distribution line, that PG&E could look at doing a design for us based on the project itself. And we have some questions on how to best move forward. I know when driving along Highway 20 towards Colusa, I see transmission towers embedded in the water. So is that something that is absolutely necessary, that we have to move those towers? I think something that we need to understand is how much of those distribution lines are still needed once the project is complete as well, because a lot of those transmission lines are based on pumps, are based on irrigation for agriculture, and some of the homes that are there currently, that's our priority list of property acquisitions, were properties that had people residing in them, so that we can make sure that they are safe. And then another question, and sorry to bombard you with questions, but another question that I think we want to find out is, what exactly is the status, or what is the action plan for PG&E if the levees do break naturally? This project is based on a very methodical way of breaching the levees to make sure that we can bring back the historic flows of Middle Creek going through the area and out into the lake. But if it happens naturally at a point that we don't want it to happen, then it would not find the historical flows, but it would still flood the area where the towers are currently located. And so we do have some problems with our levees. There is some efforts to try and patch them up, but that's pretty much all that's happening, is a patch here, a patch there. No major work. I believe it's state responsibility, but there's no major work that is happening to ensure the safety of the project area. And so really have that question of, what is PG&E going to do if it does flood because the levees do break on a natural way? And are those towers in that similar danger? Because we want to make sure that we're efficient with our funds. It's a very expensive project. And so if we don't have to move towers, awesome. If we do, then I think we need to eventually get to a plan. And I don't know when you logged into the meeting, and I apologize for not noticing, but we did talk about how we need to have a conversation between the Army Corps and our utility districts to figure out, is this a conversation that requires both parties in the same room, so that we know what PG&E can and can't do based on the Army Corps restrictions or Army Corps vision of the design of the project? Or does PG&E just need to take action, and then the Army Corps designs based around that action that PG&E has taken? So sorry, that was a lot.
That's fine. Hi, committee members. This is Melinda Rivera. I work in local government affairs for PG&E. Yeah, I apologize. I was just able to dial in a few minutes ago. I am here at the office, at PG&E's office, and we can't Zoom. I usually Zoom from a non-PG&E device when I need to Zoom. So I apologize. I'm in the office and don't have the ability to visually see anyone. So yeah, regarding, I can ask about whether or not, because yes, you're correct. I also have seen transmission towers that have been in wetland areas. And actually, I am just left a meeting here in another office where I do have some transmission folks here. So I could probably ask them and see how we can follow up on that item. What I understand is that really when it comes to design and looking at moving of assets, if these assets do need to be moved, right, we would need to find out kind of what are the plans from Army Corps of Engineers and Caltrans, right? Where will the right of way be? If this construction work occurs and if things do get moved around, just kind of, we don't know yet where we can place our facilities until we understand from our partners at Caltrans and Army Corps of Engineers where the right of way will be. And I'm not familiar like with the parcels around there, supervisors. So I don't know if we would have to move on to private property and negotiate land easements on private parcels, or if this will all be kind of public right of way and kind of franchise agreements. So it would be really helpful to know if Army Corps of Engineers or if Caltrans already have a sense of where things will be based on this project. And then there was another question too about like if there are customer meters that are displaced by the project, would we still need distribution assets? Again, I'm not entirely familiar with the scope of the work or which, kind of what is feeding what, and as far as customer meters from those existing distribution lines. If the only things that are currently being fed by the distribution equipment in that area are the 18 meters that will no longer be located there, then my understanding would be that these would then be classified as idle facilities and removed as such. But again, I don't know that I have enough information to be able to completely confirm that.
And if you can pause right there, looking at our team here, do you guys know of a need for electrical access through distribution lines once the project is completed? I'm just not aware of a need if we're trying to vacate the entire premises and turn it into marshland as it originally was. It seems to me that it may not be necessary to have any distribution wires, but again, I'm not 100%.
I think they travel across to different areas is why I think they're, am I answering some of what you're asking?
I think there's 19 distribution poles, if I remember correctly, the number. And I want to say it dead ends in the Middle Creek area. I don't think it moves electricity from one point, like from Nice all the way to Lakeport or anything like that. I think the transmission lines bring it to certain areas and then or certain substations, and then those substations feed into those areas. But again, it's my recollection. That doesn't have to be the reality of it. But if we could figure out a way to say, hey, just cross this off the list and let's vacate those wires, that would be an amazing step to take rather than figuring out how to move them for a purpose that may not even be necessary.
Peter, you look like you had a quote.
I believe that I would agree with you. That would be wonderful. But I do believe that there is one line that runs from over in the vicinity of the casino, clear across to a substation over on Highway 29 and throughout. Anyway, there's that one. It's a cross tie. And I don't know what can be done with that. As I look at it, if it has to remain, that's kind of that's a pretty big deal. Do you go down, Nice Lucerne cutoff and come clear around, or do you go around up via Upper Lake? That, in some respects, poses as many problems as, maybe not as costly, but it's amazing, many problems as the high voltage transmission towers. So I don't know what the solution there is. PG&E would have to tell us. And that might be something worth looking at in the interim too, by the way, because that's potentially, and maybe you folks could, speaking to you, Melinda, if we were able to get some indication about that, would give us some idea of what sort of costs might be involved. We do have a quote of sorts with regard to the transmission towers. I think that was the $75,000 quote, but
Mhm.
as to that cross tie line, a little more help there, I think would be very helpful.
Well,
Information be helpful to us.
Supervisor Crandall, perhaps maybe offline, would you be able to send me one or two of the addresses for the meters that would be relocated elsewhere? And that way I can look up the circuit that feeds them.
Yes, I can do that.
And I can Google Earth it and kind of
Okay.
talk it over. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yes. Yeah. I can get that to you.
Okay, that would be great. Thanks.
Yeah, and the one we're speaking about, I think that Peter just brought up, it goes across from, it's right next to the actual island itself. Well, it's adjacent to it, and then it flows through to the casino parking lot, over the casino, up on the hill, and so I think that's what Peter's referring to, right?
Well, and there's one a bit further south.
Yeah.
That goes, anyway, same idea, but it connects over to Highway 29, just north of where the 4 lanes merge into 2. There's up on the hill, a substation right up there.
Yeah.
And that's one end of it. The other end of it is over near the casino.
Okay.
So I don't know what it does. It's not, anyway, it's there.
Yeah, we'll get you those addresses so you can determine that.
Thank
back
you,
to Hartley.
Supervisor. Yeah, that would be, yeah, it sounds like these are probably fed by the Upper Lake circuits, but let me, once you send me an address, I can take a better look at it.
Did you say Hartley?
We do have, I believe, so what goes from, what someone had asked about what feeds which circuit runs to Running Creek, and that's the Upper Lake Circuit.
Okay.
Are you looking at a map,
Melinda?
Are you able to look at a map? Can you see the?
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
Yeah, so I'm looking at our, it's an Upper Lake Circuit. It runs from that substation there that's north of 29. And distribution line that, it goes up the highway there and heads east over to Running Creek. And we also have it down here, Bridge Arbor Road, Arbor, sorry. I have trifocals, but they don't always serve me as well as I would like them to. Sorry, this darn font, it's so tiny, these kids. Bridge Arbor North, does that sound familiar?
Yes.
So we do have, and that feeds several agricultural parcels and then we also, that circuit also goes along Edmonds Boulevard, EDMANDS. And it comes also back down kind of like Highway 20 is it, kind of horseshoes back down there towards the lake. So it's also got, it feeds Customer Reclamation Road, and I'm not sure if any of this is in your project area. I'm kind of guessing, so I apologize.
Sounds about right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm doing a street Google Streets view and looking at all the wires that are going into the reclamation area, and I didn't see one running entirely across the Nice Lucerne cutoff. There is some wires that come from Highway 20, I think a little bit more to the east, but I don't know that they bring electricity to those that might still need it. So. But either way, we need to figure out what we need to do with both layers, distribution and transmission. And whatever it is that we need to do, we need to figure it out with the Army Corps to make sure that we're all doing this correctly. But it would be nice to get a plan done. And of course, I know it takes time. It's not going to happen overnight. But it would be really nice if we can have some sort of plan set so that we know what kind of funds we need on our end. Because in our previous discussion about Army Corps, we know that we need $800,000 just for the design of the project itself, not for the project itself. That's going to be even more. But then we also need to know that what's it going to cost us for PG&E to move their stuff, and yeah.
So, okay, well, this is helpful. So thank you, Chairman. So yeah, so if we could, and I don't know if the Army Corps person, if you would be able to share their contact information, but maybe if we could just better understand kind of like how this would work in the sense of kind of like who goes first, right? The utilities or Army Corps of Engineers and or Caltrans, and, you know, just make sure that, you know, kind of who gets to go first and kind of who has to follow the other, right? That would be really helpful, I think, for all of us, right, to understand kind of where we go in the order. And then secondly, I'll find out if we can have these transmission towers footed in water, and if so, kind of like what's the depth of water that the existing transmission towers would be able to handle, right? Are they the correct height? Are they built to specs for that, et cetera, et cetera? And then the last question again, just once Supervisor Crandell can send me a couple of addresses, and then I can determine kind of which circuit is feeding the addresses in the project area, and determine whether or not, from a distribution standpoint, if the distribution line is heading on to other areas, or if it's just kind of a feeder circuit that's only going to the customers in that project area. And then if that's the case, which would be the best case scenario, right? Could those then just convert to idle facilities, just get removed, right? I don't know. I mean, I don't know at this time, but I think, let me know if I'm accurately capturing kind of some next steps.
I would say yes. And I'm crossing my fingers for those transmission. Because that sounds much more costly than distribution lines. And it's actually interesting. I've never done the Google Streets in the reclamation area, but you can actually travel around on Reclamation Road. It looks like a Google car went all the way around on Reclamation Road. And I'm gonna have to say I lied. It's a whole lot more than 19 distribution poles. It doesn't seem to end. But you could definitely travel through the whole thing and look at the poles.
So yeah, if you could send me kind of, since I'm not familiar, like I don't have committed to memory the project map or project area, if you could send me, like if you were to put a policy on it, right? If you could send me an address from one end and then an address from the other end, and that way it'll, you know what I'm saying, just in case we've got two separate distribution lines. Let's say, for example, Upper Lake feeds one customer, but perhaps the other customer is being fed by Lucerne Circuit. I just want to make sure that we've got a good sense of the area.
Okay.
We can send you a map so you get a visual of what that area looks like. And I'm certain, since we have an Excel spreadsheet with all the properties, that we can also send you that list of all the properties.
That would be super helpful. Thank you very much.
Melinda, I have put in the chat the email addresses for the project manager at the United States Army Corps of Engineers and his boss. So the project manager is Dylan Van Dyne and his boss is Josh Garcia. And when you connect with them, if you wish to ask them any questions, tell them that you're working on the LERDS. And I put that in there too, LERRDS. That's what the County of Lake, which is the local sponsor for the project, we're working on land, easements, relocations, rights of way, and demolitions. So that's what LERD stands for, and that's our concern in discussions with you. And then they'll know what you're up to, and they'll also be happy that we're concerned about this, because they have been as well. Anyway, thank you.
And I'm sorry, sir, I have dialed in. I don't have access to the chat. Would you be able to please read me the phone number or the email address? I apologize.
I texted it to you just now.
Okay, great. All right. Thank you very much, Supervisor. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry, yes,
So
of
yes,
course,
I will follow.
you're on the phone. I'm sorry.
And then I'll write the acronym as well, because it's LERDS. Yeah.
I think I have that, the land easements, relocation, and rights of way demonstrations.
Yeah,
Okay.
demolitions, yeah.
Oh, demolitions. Thank you.
All right. Okay. Yeah. So I figured since she was on the phone, I just texted to her. Yeah.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you very much. Are there any other questions you have for me at this time? Or, I mean, I think I think I'm clear on my homework assignment for now.
I will add.
Is there anything I've missed?
Yeah, I will add something, Melinda. I know this was something that we spoke with Allison, if I remember correctly, the name of your predecessor. We're looking for a fair way to move forward. And we feel that there's a certain level of responsibility on PG&E as well as the county. This is our project. I'm not going to deny that we are pushing for this. But at the same time, I'm going back to that natural possibility of erosion and the flood occurring. And what responsibility would PG&E take to deal with that if it were to happen? Because this is not a project that's going to be ready to start doing construction within the next year or two. I mean, realistically, I would say 10 years from now, we'd be lucky if we were in the middle of construction of this project. I hate to say that, and I'm sure my colleagues aren't happy to hear it, but let's just be realistic. And so that's 10 more years, possibly, give or take, of potential levee breaches that would eventually impact your infrastructure. And so I'm wondering what level of responsibility is PG&E looking to take when it comes to that situation? Because then maybe that can help us in our negotiating terms of how we are able to move forward. Because we should not be taking full responsibility for something that could happen on a natural basis.
Right, I understand. And that's a good question, but as you know, I am not an engineer. So in the event of any type of natural disaster, right, based on my limited time with the company and what I have seen, right? So in the event of a fire, or let's say assets on the coast, right? In the event, heaven forbid, of a tsunami, or if there is an earthquake, right? And things fail, right? The geology shifts, things that the equipment was built upon perhaps is not there anymore, right? So I think every type, a levee failure, I believe, is right up there with any other type of natural disaster, right? So what would happen in a natural disaster? And that's really going to be contingent upon, again, working collaboratively with the partners, right? Army Corps of Engineers and Caltrans. Where will it be safe to restore infrastructure to if there is a natural disaster, if a levee breaks, if there's an earthquake, something like that? Where can the infrastructure safely be relocated, and what will be the lead time for that? I don't have those answers at this time, and I'm not familiar enough with what might move if the levees were to fail, right? I don't know what it would look like. So I'm sorry, I don't have like a real clear answer on that, but I do know that, right, with other types of disasters where the equipment has to be relocated as a result of this, it's, all of these agencies, and I've seen it just with wildfires, right? How closely PG&E has to work with Caltrans, or has to work with Army Corps of Engineers as part of the rebuild and recovery process. So yeah, it's difficult for me to say at this time kind of what would happen if the levies were to fail.
Yeah, and definitely not expecting an answer. I think that requires a much larger conversation. I just wanted to make sure you had that question in mind when having those conversations with your colleagues.
Understood. Well, thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, and thank you for coming and understand the whole situation with the not being able to link in. And I think I have an old email address for you, and I know that probably posed an issue as well. So thank you for coming in.
All right. Well, thank you very much for your time. Chairman Sabatier, Supervisor Crandall, and members of the committee. Again, apologize I was late, and I will work to get this information to the supervisors before your next committee meeting, which I guess is in early December.
Absolutely, and we'll get you that map and those that spreadsheet of properties.
Okay, great. All right, thank you very much. Have a good rest of your day.
You too. Thank you.
You too.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Okay. Anybody want to discuss anything further on this, or are we? No?
I'm good.
Okay. How far did you guys just go straight into Army Corps after item 2?
Well, we kind of skipped over number 2, and I think that typically we don't have much of anything unless we already know about it. But without Scott and without Marina, I doubt that they're looking to add something right now.
Okay, so let's see. Acquisition. Did you guys do that? We kind of covered some of that, or
we didn't do any of the rest.
Okay. You just want to push through or table everything until next meeting? Because it's 12? Because I don't mind either way. It's up to you all.
I know we got a report from Marina, which kind of gave us an update on the parcel acquisition. Unless Celia has something else to add.
No, but pretty much what Marina put in her report as far as Mountainous and Ortega, and then some other offers have been presented. I've been working with the people at the Sino-American Buddhist Association, helping them clear up some title issues for their properties. So we'll have a smoother acquisition process with that, but we're waiting for their final yes or no on the offer. I think they're going to go ahead with it. So that'll be another huge chunk that we're going to have. So by the end of the year, we will have 3 big chunks that we need.
Excellent.
So yeah, it feels pretty good.
Thank you. That's good news. Yeah. Okay, so well, maybe let's see. What about the minutes? That's on item 7. Yeah, do you want to go just jump to that? Or Mary Jo, you had a question.
I have a question about the minutes. Is this the appropriate time?
Yes, I was going to go ahead because we had project area parcel acquisition, Department of Water Resources. There's no updates on that, is there?
Other than we got our extension.
Okay, board action. So yeah,
and officially approved by DWR.
Right. Okay, so we'll the minutes. I'll open the minutes then. Item 7, and so go ahead and
well, I kept in the one section. I kept reading all these questions everybody brought up. And none of the answers were in the minutes, just the questions. And I don't understand, were the questions not answered? Were they supposed to be answered at this month's meeting?
I think we did ask, do you have a specific section you're talking about?
Let me pull them up. It's at the bottom of the first page, the last paragraph. Supervisor Spade asked for clarification about the 100-year floodplain and where the waters would be reached. Dr. Lyons asked for clarification if the changes from partial to full parcels would require relocations. Wyndham asked if Monument has had discussions with property owners. Are there answers to those questions?
I think that, so the first 2, no. I think that they had just found out that the floodplain did not quite meet the previous floodplain of the past, which means that has to be re-reviewed. And as far as the changing from partial to full acquisitions, because of those that changed the northern boundary of the flood zone, I don't know that we had an answer. I think they were still looking into that. So I would suspect that we will get an answer to that. And I don't know if it'll be in December, because it's all a matter of finishing up that survey to make sure that the line is correct before we decide what action to take. The next one about Monument, if they've had discussions with property owners, I believe that the answer to that, and maybe we can add it to it, and Celia, you may remember better, and of course everyone else on the committee, I believe that the answer was that everyone has been reached out to by Water Resources, but not everyone has been reached out to by Monument.
That's correct. We're waiting for the plats and legals, which are this week. And then the notice of decision appraised goes out, and that will initiate conversations with the property owners at that point. So any questions they'll have will go to Monument. But once those plats and legals are done, I understand the line, the 100-year flood line will then be determined, and then we will know which ones are full relocations and which ones aren't. So I think by Friday, I'm going to have a lot more answers in that regard. If that helps. I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, I missed the first part of the meeting because I had to emergency take my cat to the vet. So those were questions I had too.
And so if it's possible to provide that response, since there was a specific response, that Monument has not reached out to everybody due to waiting on the checklist of our responsibilities of providing the plats and legals and so on, and that, but staff has reached out to all property owners. If we can add that to it, that would be great.
Here.
Celia, this is, I just want to toss out an idea for you because you're so effective in all these things. But when it comes to relocating the Seychelles folk, if I've pronounced their names correctly, the district owns that adjoining all that excess property, some of which they're going to get from Oldham, some of which is already next door. And then I think the following, so it adds up to about 40 acres. And I would suggest the idea of trading the Seychelles folks for their property for that 40 acres.
In the legal process of relocation, I think that is absolutely doable. However, it may be a longer process than just finding a replacement property for them. And okay. I don't know if time will allow for us to do a trade.
I guess the question would be something to perhaps present to them as a possibility, and in which you figure out intervening things. Anyway, it just strikes me as a good use of that 40 acres.
That is a potential. There's very specific very specific steps the Federal Highway Administration and those involved in the funding that we have to follow in a relocation. So we really have to defer to the property owner we're relocating. The only thing that we can insist is that it's safe and sanitary for them. Yeah. But they actually, a trade could be an option. I'll have to check in with my Caltrans manual and see how that works. Because I know that time is not in our favor. And if a trade takes longer than a relocation, sure. We'd have to go with the quickest.
Yeah. The other feature too is selling that 40 acres no matter what, because that would give us some more money to do more things with. So
sure.
Same will be true of Sealy. Okay. Anyway, well, thank you very much, Celia. I'm awfully glad you're working on this because you're so knowledgeable and
well, thank you.
Know how to
I'm pushy for sure.
I really appreciate it. Thanks.
Hey, anything else referring to the minutes that we can that we need to add to or correct?
I move to approve with amendments.
I have a motion by Supervisor Spatia. Is there a second?
I second the motion.
Second by Harry Lyons. Is there anyone that opposes the approval of the minutes? Hearing none, the minutes will pass unanimously. And we'll move to, let's see, I think we're at the end, I think. Actually, non-timed items, public expression. Do we have anything? Anybody would like to? Peter, your hands up.
Oh, I apologize. I didn't take it down.
Oh,
That's,
so our next meeting will be December 6th, Zoom conference call. Is there anything, are we having a normal meeting, or do we need to invite anybody this next time or anything like that?
I would like to just request that we get a as updated spreadsheet, knowing who still needs plats and legals, who has Paragon or Monument, not Paragon, because they've communicated with everybody that's on their list. But just if we can get an up-to-date data on every single property, so we can understand what kind of progress we've made, things like that.
Excellent. Yeah, I agree with that.
yes.
I will
Consensus.
make sure we get that together.
Thank you, Celia.
Thank
And
you.
I would like to have access to the map that the Civic Spark fellow made. I don't know if that's possible, or maybe there's one to update it. I don't know.
Oh, no, I know what you're talking about.
I'll check with Marina, but I think Daniela was doing all of the updates and things to the map, but I could be wrong. I know Liam worked on it as well. So we'll find out who's got the most up-to-date map and get that to you.
Yeah, that would help me with the public. There are people that that ask questions of me about how it's going along and whatnot, and I would really like to have a map to give them on somewhere on the internet.
Okay.
Thanks.
I'm saying okay, but I'll ask Marina, but I think we can do that.
Yeah, okay.
Pretty sure we can.
I'm looking because I thought it was already available online. I guess not. I'm not finding it.
We'll reach out to Daniela.
Yeah.
And then I think, Valerie, you have a question.
I was wondering if I could get an invitation to the meetings. I've just been getting them from Harry or Peter lately. I'm just wondering if I could get.
Sure, I'll get you on our list, Val, from Marina's side, so that you're getting it from us as well.
Thanks. And my other question was, earlier Bruno mentioned support from the environmental groups, and Middle Creek Restoration Coalition has most of the environmental groups in the area on it. Just the Lake County Land Trust comes to the meetings. So I think you have a lot of support if you need. I don't know what you need from us, but we'll do it.
At one point, we're going to be asking for some letters. And I think that while everybody might be a part of that group and in support, I think having individualized letters to make sure, or maybe one letter with all of their emblem or logos, but having all of those as much as possible, including people who are a bit of a thorn in our side, like the Native Plant Society, who are suing us. It would still be nice to get their letter of support for some other projects.
Yeah.
And so I think that the more the merrier, in my opinion.
I just wanted to let you know, you know, all of us are in support of this project. And I noticed that we have a large agenda. I mean, I'm sort of new to coming. I've only been to 3 meetings, but I'm wondering if it's just going to focus in on the land acquisitions now until they're done, and how we can help push them forward from our side, if there's any way.
It's a definite process as far as going per the agreement. So right now we're just in full on forward mode to get these done.
That's great.
It's pretty much on us here and the consultants. So I'm, like I say, I'm kind of been the one that's been pushing everybody to let's keep going. We got to get this on the agenda. I need an approval today. So yeah, but I will definitely reach out if we can use any assistance.
Okay, thanks.
You bet.
And I would say that the agenda is meant more to keep us focused on all the items that we need to kind of bring together in the long run to make this happen. So that's why we talk about Army Corps. That's why we talk about PG&E and Caltrans and all those, because we have to make sure that we're not moving forward without missing something, or else we're going to be losing a lot of time if we miss anything.
Well, and I suppose you want to be on their radar for when we are finally.
Right. Right. We made a lot of headway. We want to keep the ball going, you know.
Yeah.
That's the other thing. And
Well,
so
now
we
it's
just
really clear that it's one step at a time, which is, you know, sort of a bummer, but we still want to be on their radar. So.
all right.
Figure out how to win within the boundaries that we are given.
like Fear Factor.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah,
We'll get it.
All right.
yeah.
Yeah, we'll get there. All right. Is there anything else that anybody has or anything of that nature? And if not, go ahead and adjourn.
Thank you, everyone, for a long meeting.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody.
Thank you, and sorry for the for being late.
And thanks to Harry for getting Ian here. That was huge. Thank you
Yeah.
very
Good
much.
job, Harry.
Absolutely. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.